And hello, Charlotte. Welcome. Fantastic to see you.
Hi, it's great to be here, and congrats to Staffbase on launching your campus today.
Thank you very much. I think, yeah, I look forward to actually, the team and I were chatting after the event just to like check in how the general feeling is. And like Travis was saying just now, I think there's a lot of relief going on in the teams. I'm also very excited to be sharing this with the world today. So Charlotte, maybe starting off with, maybe you can give us a quick introduction of your background, your backstory, and your work over the last years.
Yeah, I'll keep it very short. Like many communicators, I came out of the journalism field and landed in PR comms and internal comms. I worked for 10 years at SAP, initially as an individual contributor doing executive comms. And by the time I left in June last year, I was running employee comms globally at SAP and also running executive comms. So I bring a particular lens, which is the combination of internal and external, and that'll be those kind of themes will come out in our interview today.
Yeah, fantastic. Thank you so much for joining us here today. So as promised, this session is very much about Strategize. But before we dive into that completely, like we mentioned, the IC maturity assessment and this model in the last sessions. And so it's an assessment that you can do on our website. And so far we've had 2,499, almost 2,500 participants. So we'll share the link with you in the chat again as well. So it takes 10 minutes. And the idea is that you can get an understanding of how you are performing in these different areas and maybe where there's some potential, and maybe also just where you can see that you're really doing a fantastic job. And one of the questions in this poll is, we spend most of our time reacting to requests to get stuff out. That means there's little time available to be proactive and work on all strategic topics. And now we've just asked this question here as well. And I'm just looking at the results quickly. And so the results that we got from the maturity model is actually that 76% agree. So that they really do not have a lot of time to be strategic. And only 24% actually agreed. And I'm curious to see whether this was the same here in the audience. And yeah, it's pretty much, so we have 86% who are actually agreeing. So it's even more people than from the survey. Charlotte, what do you think? What's going on here? Why are people having such a hard time to focus on strategy?
Yeah, it's really the old chestnut of comms, is how much time do I spend, doing strategic work, and how much time do I spend getting stuff done? And it's extremely tough because we're all human after all. And it is a zero-sum game, because if you spend 99% of your time doing ops stuff, you're only going to have 1% of time available for strategy. So it's really about communicators clawing some time back for strategy, but also making sure that their executives and CEOs can see that they're owning that strategy. So, it's about being proactive and kind of putting their arms around strategy and owning it.
And what would you say are the benefits of doing that? Like what's different? How does the work or the day-to-day also look different? And how does it benefit the organization?
Well, I think you immediately become more visible to the executives, which is always great. They actually see what you're doing. And I think you become a lot more proactive, because if you're always in reactive mode, then, you're just responding to demands. They flow in and, you complete one and you get to the next one. But if you're able to work in a strategic way, then you're setting the agenda, you're defining the time, and you're owning it. And it actually becomes much more satisfying from a job point of view. And the more satisfied and more happy you are, probably the better job you're going to do. So I think it's kind of a win-win for communicators.
Yeah. And maybe, so if you are a communicator who's currently in that 24, or actually in our results here, in the 86 or the 76% who's not strategic yet, like what's something you can do today? Like what's that first step into trying to change the way that's going for you at the moment?
Well, I think it's really important to build a strategy, like to have one. and maybe some folks are just too busy doing the ops stuff and they haven't had time to step back and actually build a strategy. So I'd say that's very much the first step is create one. And I always say it's super important for a communication strategy to be as close as possible to the business strategy. And I've been in weird situations where it isn't. I've been in a situation where there was zero strategy. And when there's zero strategy, then you're just 100% reactive and you're not in control and you're not getting that job satisfaction, that happiness that I was talking about. I've also been in the situation where the comm strategy is irrelevant, like it doesn't match the business strategy. And that's weird because executives look at you, or the leadership of the company look at you and think, what are you doing? Do you actually understand the business? And then I've been in a situation where there's too much strategy. And that's also horrible because you can't focus. So I think it's really important when communicators are building their comm strategy is to keep it as close to the business strategy as possible and keep it as focused as possible.
Yeah, great. Thank you for that. And sorry, this is the same slide again. So as promised, so we wanted to chat about the Strategize Expert Certificate a little bit today. So just a quick recap for anyone who's just joined the second session. So this is a certificate that we are launching today. It consists of 6 lessons that really dive deep into internal comm strategy and to making that first big step, but kind of one piece at the time for it also not to be overwhelming. And so what we've included in this certificate is we start off with just the value of strategic comms for an organization, what that means, what the purpose of comms is, and how to really, like you said, right, bring the business strategy, the comm strategy as close as possible to the business strategy. So what are these kind of strategic topics, these big sort of topics that you plan throughout the year, and what are the narratives that underneath those topics? Then, because a lot of the things going on today are related to change, we go into change next, right? So what does strategic change look like in organizations? What's your function as communications to support this kind of change in an organization? Then we dive into planning comms objectives with the help of the OKR model, how to just kind of really connect everything that you're doing to what else is happening in the organizations. We talk about stakeholder management. We talk about obviously the audience and getting to know really who the people are that you are trying to engage and connect with the business. And then last but not least, we look at your comms channel. So running a comms audit and really understanding the level of how your channels are already working and perhaps where to make improvements to make sure your messages reach everyone that they need to reach. Charlotte, just kind of looking at this, is there any particular area that you would say is for you the most interesting?
I think it's really about the value of strategic comms for me, and also change. And, it dawned on me that communications is change. Like, it's very, very seldom that an executive is going to get up and stand in front of employees and go, "Hey guys, just here to tell you, nothing is changing." You're always communicating change. And so I really think that's super important. And then, as we all know, the world is constantly changing. Unexpected things happen all the time. So it's about having that kind of change resilience and being able to quickly pivot. If as we all had to do during COVID, we all went from in the office to at home almost overnight. So being able to pivot as well, I think, is really, really important.
Yeah. There's a few other questions actually that we have in the maturity assessment, because a key piece of this is actually kind of connecting to the larger part of the business, connecting to leaders, connecting to executives, understanding what the direction is that the business is going into. So one of the questions from the assessment is, in our organization, senior managers take the recommendations of the internal comms function seriously. And we were actually very happy to see that 68% from the people who've participated have agreed with this. And then the other question is, in our organization, internal comms leaders are invited to leadership meetings dealing with organizational strategic planning. And what we saw here is it's almost a 50-50, a little bit more agree than disagree. Charlotte, you've worked with executives a lot throughout your career. What kind of advice would you have for communicators to start really building this partnership, this relationship with leadership, And what have been like your biggest learnings throughout your career in these relationships?
Yeah, I mean, it's a tough one for communicators, because how can you influence if you're not in the room? But you have to kind of build a reputation for yourself so that you get in the room. And I can see that, obviously from the numbers, that's still a problem. But it's also really great to see that leadership are recognizing the importance of comms. And I think it's really important, personally, I think it's really important for communicators to be there from the beginning and not just tacked on at the end and told, go communicate. Because we're so close to our audiences that we can actually affect that strategic planning, and have insights that maybe managers who might be slightly further away, or leadership might be slightly further away from audiences. We're like the first test case. We're the first employees, so we kind of can be that individual who stands for the employee in terms of that organizational strategic planning. Yeah, and in terms of working with executives, I think it's about demonstrating that strategic ability, so making sure that the comm strategy is as close to the business strategy as possible, and then focusing on extremely relevant key topics. So you talked about planning out those topics for either the quarter or the half year, ensuring that those are really, really relevant to executives. And then it's about demonstrating to executives that you can help them get better at communicating, because at the end of the day, it's usually them who's standing up in front of an employee audience or the media or at a conference. They are the while comms might script the message, they are the purveyors of the message. So it really needs to be an extremely close partnership. And when it is, it's magic. Not always the case that communicators get that invitation to be that partner.
Yeah, and I think a big piece that we also kind of just think about and talk about in the training that we do is very much that you have to kind of learn the language of leadership, right? You have to start kind of really just getting into the head of the executives, understand what they're about, how they think about comms. And like from your experience, what would you say? Like what do executives think about comms? What are the things that really matter to them? What's the type of language as a communicator that you have to use to access them? Or maybe even what are certain things about communication that make them feel maybe less comfortable?
Yeah, look, executives are humans too. And comms is one of the more challenging topics, in their portfolios, because you can't control the outcomes with comms. So, everybody's learned all the steps along the sales pipeline, what you have to do in order to be a good salesperson, or everybody understands very rationally and logically how finance works. But comms is kind of murky. And I think that executives are often a little bit threatened. And that's why I say it's really important for communicators to become partners to executives. So it's about, and in terms of building that partnership, it's about demonstrating that you have a good understanding of the business. And then it's spending as much time as you possibly can with or near executives. So I always say, if you're doing executive comms, or if you're working on a comms plan with an executive, you really do need face time with them. And some will try and, give that face time away to a chief of staff or somebody in between. So I really recommend the communicators kind of fight hard for the face time and that exposure, because even 15 minutes per week with an executive can make a really huge difference to your understanding of the business and your ability to reveal to them that you do understand the strategy and the business strategy and where things are going. And worst case, if you can't get time on their calendar to be with them, then at least ask if you can shadow them. Because if you shadow them, then you see how they operate in their business meetings, and you get a sense of the tone and the language and the way that they describe business problems, so that when you're planning your comms, that they will eventually be, the purveyors of, that you're demonstrating to them that you already have that, you understand their tone, but also the way that they speak about the business.
Yeah. Yeah, thank you for that. Actually, as I was going through these questions, I found one question that I was really, really excited actually to share with you and to share the results with you. So maybe we can add that in the poll as well now. So the question is, all companies, or the statement is all company leaders and line managers are clear about their role in the communication process. So if we can share that poll quickly, I would love to kind of see if the results here are the same as we have from the survey. I'll hop on over and share the survey in the meantime. So this is the result that we got.
Wow.
So 81% actually disagreed with this statement. What do you make of that, Charlotte?
Yeah, look, I'm no longer at SAP, and I work as a comms advisor to CEOs, and I've heard CEOs say, "Oh, I'm not going to talk to the media. I'm just going to send my, I'm just going to send my comms person." And so that demonstrates to me that that leaders aren't completely clear, and I think it truly is a problem, and unfortunately, it would appear that it's up to communicators to educate leaders and managers what their roles are. And one of the things we used to do in my former role was, when we were working on a particular comms plan for a particular rollout, we would make it very clear within the plan who was doing what, so that when you submitted the plan to, the executive and their team, they would very clearly see what their roles and responsibilities were. But I mean, that's just an operational thing. So I think that it speaks to an avoidance. To me, it speaks to that fear of comms that I mentioned before, that people find it a little bit murky and a little bit hard. But I think that solid communicators who understand the goal and understand what they want to achieve can help to educate managers and leaders about what their roles are.
And in terms of like how that looks, if you haven't really set up really kind of enabling leader and executives, like kind of getting started. I remember like we had a conversation about this a while back. You were talking about, how you would go about really trying to understand different leaders and how, kind of maybe the same approach. They're not all, right? You said they're humans too, right? Everybody's different. Everybody has their own kind of way to communicate. And you were saying, I think this thing of like matching the executive to the message. And so I was just wondering about how you kind of get to know leaders to understand how to best help them become better communicators.
Well, it's largely, the getting to know part is largely about observation. So that it's that really important exposure that I talked about before, but it's also being sensitive to who they are as humans. So, everybody is different. And I worked with one executive who, we kept putting him on big stages because he had great tenure and he was very, very senior. And then we put him on a big stage and he slightly crumbled. And it was kind of mysterious to us that he wasn't able to manage the audience. And then I observed him at a smaller meeting, and I observed that he was completely brilliant in a room of 30 people. So we pivoted his comms to putting him in front of groups of 30 people instead of the large stages. And then when he was on a big stage, we made sure he had 5 or 6 other people with him who he could turn to when he was suddenly feeling nervous or couldn't remember something or wanted somebody to be a little bit more technical. So we found ways to kind of support him and shore him up and make sure that he felt confident. And in that moment where we started putting him in 30-person meetings instead of 300-person events, he could tell that we understood him and that we were rooting for him and helping him become a better communicator, so that when he was on stage, he felt supported. So he actually started to improve as a speaker. So it's about being sensitive to the human and finding the place where they shine.
Yeah. Charlotte, I kind of have one last question for you, and then I'd just like to also open up to a bit of a Q&A for some questions from everyone who's here with us today. So my question to you would be, so in terms of your own learning and development, like what are your personal learning goals for this year, or what are you busy learning at the moment?
Yeah, I'm deep in learning. So 30 years on from my undergraduate degree, I've embarked on a part-time master's degree run out of HEC Paris and Oxford University. And it's a master's in change leadership. And I was at Oxford last week. I had a very intense week there, learning with the profs, and we were learning about spaces. So spaces for innovation. We were learning about the space of future scenario planning. So what it means to put yourself in the space of the future and then bring yourself back to now. And I'm still working on how those parts match up with comms. But I'm enjoying so much learning about change because, as I said earlier, we're in the business of change as communicators. And I really wanted to understand it more strongly from an academic point of view. So I'm kind of in the fire hose of learning at the moment.
Yeah. Okay, that's great to hear about just branching out into different areas as well. I remember last time we spoke, I think you were on your way to Paris for one of those sessions. I'm so glad to hear that's been a success. So anyone who wants to kind of ask some questions, I see there are some questions that have started in the chat already. So feel free to post your questions and I'll just share the first one here with you. So the question is, would it be beneficial to establish style guides for executives, or is shadowing a better solution, or some combination of both?
I'm not entirely sure about style guides, but what I found super helpful was building message houses. So if you say you've got those 3 key topics for the quarter or the year, we would build a message house so that executives didn't have to learn new stuff every time they spoke in front of an audience. That kind of consistency of message is, first of all, super important for their audiences because you want to hear people saying the same things about their business strategy, but it also gives them a sense of security. It's like, okay, these are my 3 key messages. I'm perfectly happy to go out and disseminate them and also bring examples from the customers I've met and the conversations that I've had.
Perfect. Thank you so much. And I see we're also at time, so that's perfect. We actually made it, which is fantastic. Thank you so much, Charlotte, for joining us here today.
May
for anyone else,
quickly say something?
Absolutely.
Yeah, I just want to say that anyone who's watching, if they wish to have a chat about executive comms and how to work with executives or how to do strategic comms, you can find me on LinkedIn. Please feel free to get in touch. I'm really, really happy to be part of this community and really touched to being invited here today.
Thank you so much. Super appreciate having you, Charlotte, and all of your insights. And oh yeah, by the way, Charlotte is also featured in one of our upcoming certificates, which is in the Communicate Expert certification. And it's all about executives, enabling your organization, enabling your leaders to be better communicators. So yeah, we'll be sure to let everyone know once we launch that certificate, and then you can learn from Charlotte directly again. Fantastic. Thank you so much.